Misfits, welcome to the Misfit Heroes podcast. My name is Chris, and together we are going on a journey. Now, Misfits, I don't know if you were one of the 1 in 4 households in America that turned into the Super Bowl in 2022, but the halftime show was performed by Dr. Dre, Eminem, Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent, and some others. And during the performance, Snoop Dogg was throwing up gang signs and representing his colors from the past. Now, there's no disrespect to Snoop. I grew up listening to his music. I could probably rhyme all the verses to Gin and Juice right here. I'm actually a big fan. But it dawned on me while I was watching this that there's another side to his music that people overlook in between hearing the hot beats and sick rhymes. The performance glorified a lifestyle with a history of violence, crime, drugs, and debauchery that appears like lyrics, dance routines, and lowriders, but for some is an everyday existence. My guest tonight has lived this life firsthand, and now he's living a life transformed by Jesus. Pastor Danny Sanchez is the executive director of the City Peace Project, and he's recently written a book, Post-Traumatic Quest, where he vulnerably details his path from a descent into abuse, alcoholism, and gang violence to encouraging and uplifting his community via mentorship and leadership programs designed to give hope to people that feel they don't have a chance in this world. Misfits, this story is wild, and I can't wait to share it with you. So get ready for the next episode. Please welcome Danny Sanchez.
Playing the Misfit Heroes podcast.
Danny, welcome to the Misfit Heroes podcast. I am very excited to talk to you. I just finished your book, and I gotta say, I couldn't put it down. I finished it in an hour. It is such a crazy story. It's just equal parts, raw and gritty, and then also just inspirational and uplifting and emotional as well. So you really did a great job of telling your story. But thanks for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really honored to be on here.
Well, Danny, you are the executive director of the City Peace Project, and I want to talk about that. I'm sure I want to get into that in the future, but we got to talk about that life of yours. It's just bananas, man. So tell me, let's introduce people to you a little bit. So tell me about your childhood and your upbringing a little bit. You grew up in San Jose, correct?
I grew up in San Jose. I've lived here all my life. I moved to southern Texas for 6 months. That's the only other place I lived outside of San Jose, and it's just interesting because, everybody knows San Jose as the heart of the Silicon Valley. But, when I was younger, it was a much smaller town. It's so funny because there were still people I don't want to make it like a Western, but people were on the horses out there. There were some farms on some streets, it's called King Road. It's a major street on East San Jose. Chickens, it's just funny, just for what everybody thinks about San Jose and what we are now. I mean, what we were then. So it's just, it's funny. But yeah, I was born and raised here, lived all of my life here, and I watched the city grow, I don't know what the population was when I was younger, but I know we're over 1 million people. I think we're the 10th largest city in America, right? 10th or 11th largest city in America.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Well, yeah, like I said, your story in your book and reading about you, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. I swear, if there hasn't been a movie made about you at some point in your life, we have been underserved as a community, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your book. The book, it deals a lot with your personal struggles with abuse and family relationships and stuff like that. And it also deals with some gang violence. So can you give us just a brief overview of your book and what it's about?
So my book is titled Post-Traumatic Quest. It's my quest to transcend trauma, turn my pain to purpose, and find peace. Like I was saying about San Jose, it was a much different place back then. I grew up with not many boundaries, right? My parents divorced when I was very young. I would go back and forth into different homes. It was fun because, I was a little 7-year-old riding a mini bike, in East San Jose, climbing trees, throwing rocks. My dad was, probably hanging out with his friends, getting high, drinking, while I was doing whatever I wanted, and it was scary, because, there was a lot of drugs and guns in my family, just around, not that I even realized it back then, but looking back. And there's a lot of shady people, and that's where, things happened to me. I was unsupervised, so the book talks about my life, as a from childhood, what I had been through, and the trauma. It's important for everyone to understand that we all deal with pain, right, in some way, shape, or form. Nobody's exempt, right? We all deal with either physical or emotional pain, and I have my fair share of physical and emotional pain in my life, that I dealt with, and that's why, when we first wrote the book, we shelved it for 7 years because it was hard to be vulnerable. But I think it's important for me to share this story because the book is written mostly for the kids that I work with, right? Kids that are disengaged and involved in gangs. We gave out 300 copies to Santa Clara County Juvenile Hall, giving it to the kids. But most of my younger years were just um, it seemed fun, but I would not let my kids do most of the stuff, you
Right.
know, that my dad let me do. And I'm talking most of my dad because I think he was the one that was kind of just doing his thing, and we followed along, we tagged along to what he was doing all day, whether it was hanging out with women, drinking, partying, people were at our house, or he was drug dealing, whatever it was. I always smelled marijuana. I didn't know what it was. I've always had people try to give me a drink of alcohol when I was younger, just in these parties. My mom, on the other hand, she worked 12 hours a day. We lived with my grandparents when they divorced, right? In the early days, there was a lot of abuse in my house towards my mom. I don't know if my dad was coming off drugs. I have no idea, but he would throw dishes if he didn't like the meal. We witnessed domestic violence in my home. It was scary.
Yeah.
But when they divorced, I just remember just these two different places. Like I wanted attention from one of them. You know what I mean? My dad was too busy in his life, and it seemed like my mom was too busy working. And we lived with my grandparents, bless their heart. But they were really my great grandparents, and they weren't. They had already raised generations of kids. And
Right.
they were old. So it was hard. And if you look at all of this, you think about it, like when I say abuse, I was physically, sexually abused. I was, I was beaten. I was, and when I say beaten, I think in the sense of like, I was annoying to my family. I would do things that would, get people upset at me. I would throw things or yell or, throw tantrums and stuff like that. Right. I'd get, a spanking, you know what I mean? But, I think sometimes, I was just, I think just, I probably got my mom, like, like she was just, really upset, like, just kept, um, being annoying. My brother would lock me in the closet, and put blankets over my head and tell me I can't breathe. So I was terrified, of not being able to breathe, or, like being stuck I had claustrophobia for a long time,
Mm.
so that was really a big part of when I was growing up, and just feeling kind of a sense of abandonment. No one was really 100% there. I lived in my mind a lot. When I was young, I would just imagine, playing with toys, like on the blankets while mom was asleep, dinosaurs and all that stuff. I had a crazy imagination, but I think the imagination also covered a lot of the trauma. I didn't have to deal with a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with.
Yeah, it's very crazy. You go through your childhood life in the book, and you go through, your teenage years as well. And I'm not spoiler alert, but I'm not going to go too far into it. But you eventually go into gangs when you're a teenager, and you know some of the stuff that you just went through was just insane. The amount of trauma. Can you talk about that a little bit? Can you talk about your teenage years and how you got introduced into the gangs? Like, what sort
Yeah.
of just got you to that point?
When I grew up, I was very guarded. I was just thinking about, the interview and today, and I was thinking about, like, when I was a kid, I used to sleep in my clothes because I was afraid maybe somebody would do something to me. Every day I would sleep with my clothes, fully clothed, pants, shirt, not pajamas, I would wrap like something to guard my neck at night. So I was a very, very guarded person, as a child, right? And I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up like if there was a pin drop in my house, I'd be awake, And I was also terrified. I had night terrors when I was younger. So I would always feel like I was being suffocated by something, when I was younger. All of those things together made me a very guarded person. I think, just my mom, she did her best to give us everything we needed, but she had to work, and then she also had her own life, right? And when she worked, it was 12 hours. So imagine in my teenage years, it was, I'd act like I was going to school. As soon as I saw her car gone, I was hiding down the street. All my friends would be at my house, and we were trying everything, drugs. Girls were coming over. We were trying to make drugs, and we were 13, 14 years old doing all this stuff, just trying, experimenting with all these different things, in my teenage years, I think, the gang part of it, most of the kids that were part of the gang that I was a part of, they were my childhood friends. Some of them I'd known since kindergarten, and we're teenagers now. We all bonded, because I feel like we all felt like we didn't have a place, even the ones that had mom and dad at home. I think that one of my friends, I remember his parents were older, and I think he kind of felt disconnected. And so we all kind of bonded together. I mean, there's many different reasons why people join gangs. I think sometimes it's just for your friends are doing it. It's generational. Like my dad, my uncles, my family, friends, they were all a part of it. You know what I mean? So it's just like a natural thing for me. And I was honestly, I wasn't like technically like a gangster. I was a skater. I wanted to be a skateboarder, but there was no skateboarders where I lived.
Right.
So I just got drawn into that lifestyle, and it's I think it was just like I felt like they loved me and they accepted me, but also there's some things that come with it. You feel like you're a part of a family now. You got protection because there's a gang that's gonna help you if something happens to you. We share, it's community, everything, you know what I mean? And we would food, you go to their house, eat. If they had money, they shared money. So it was just like I had a little bit of money then. And then, I had power. I felt like, like when girls were attracted to me, and all these things because I was a tough guy,
It's really crazy. I don't want to give away too much of your book. I know I keep saying that, but one story that stood out to me was when you were I believe when you were about to be initiated into the gang and you attempted a drive-by. And the way that played out was just so intense because I think it really speaks to eventually your change of heart and your growth with Christ. And I want to talk about that later too. But can you walk us through the events of that drive-by incident?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back a little bit,
Sure.
and then I'll move towards that. But so most of my life, I didn't get, I wasn't great at sports. I wasn't great at school, and the only thing that I became good at was fighting. And the book does talk about my first fight, right? And having people fear me, gave me like a sense of pride, right?
Yeah.
And I would get into a lot of fist fights, throughout my entire life. But at that point in time, and you gotta think about this, right? I'm probably about 13 or 14 years old. I weighed 90 pounds. I was 95 pounds. I was this little tall, lanky guy. And I wanted to take it to the next level. I really wanted to be somebody, and that's, there had been knife fights, there had been fist fights, other weapons, but I never used a gun before that. I mean, I've used a gun, out hunting with my dad or stuff like that, right? But I never in my mind did it, I think to use it as a weapon against somebody. I mean, of course, like, in the way that I was doing it at the time, right? Yeah. So, we're these two 13 or 14-year-old kids. He's driving. A friend of mine's driving. Wow. This kid ends up committing a murder later and does life in prison. He was charged as a adult when he was 17 years old.
Wow.
And, did like 30 plus years in prison for that. He just recently got out. I did see him. I went to go see him. But he's driving the car. We drive into a spot where we know that our rivals are at, right? And it's packed because it's not only a spot for gangs, where the rivals hang out, but it was just a party place, right? And we drive in there, and we're looking. I spot my target. I tell my friend, I got a sawed-off shotgun underneath my seat. I slowly I'm pulling out the shotgun, right? Because I think we caught eyes. I think he was like he knew something was going to happen, but I don't think he really got it. And as I was pulling the gun up, San Jose Police Department slowly drives in between us and my target. So I slowly put the gun back under and we take off, right? But that would, because back then it was, nowadays it's easier for people to access guns, but back then it wasn't, it wasn't as easy. Well, at least for me, maybe other people, but it wasn't that easy. But that was an eye-opening experience for me as I look back, because you know what, I would have been in the same shoes as most of my friends. Most of the guys that were involved in the gangs either went to prison or died. So I feel like God was really present in that moment with me, because you're a 14-year-old, 13-year-old little kid. You don't think about the consequences, right? You don't think about what I was doing. That's a human being that I was about to take his life. That's somebody's child, somebody's brother. And so I look back and I thank God that it didn't happen.
It's amazing to me. I speak with believers all the time, and the stories of how, everybody's got that one moment, you know what I mean? Like that one moment that they realize that God gave me grace. Like God, even if you're not a believer yet, the one common thing that I speak with so many people about is, what was that one moment that, you realized that God was looking out for you before you even knew him? Is that your moment, or what, do you have other ones where it was?
I mean, I was a knucklehead, right? Some people go to, college to go to school or, get their education. I got mine from the streets, school of hard knocks.
Right.
I don't, I was really like, I didn't care about my life, right? I felt like, when I was, I think I was 14 years old when I went to juvenile hall, I was charged with strong arm robbery. I didn't do it. I was actually there, but I didn't do it. I was charged with strong arm robbery. I had a felony. I thought my life was over. I thought no one cared about me. I flirted with death. I did not care. I've been stabbed 11 times, and not at the same time. I've been stabbed in the kidney. People have tried to kill me. I've been in car accidents. I was in the hospital. I had to have exploratory surgery for being stabbed. And none of that stuff fazed me. The next couple of days when I got out of the hospital after I was there for 2 weeks for the stabbing to my kidney, I was drinking again. I was partying. I was trying to cope with my pain, and it was a badge of honor to me, that I was stabbed. I felt like I was invincible multiple times, that I was stabbed. And those weren't the moments. I flipped over in the car on the freeway. 9 times the car flipped. That's what they said. The witnesses said.
Yeah.
And the only reason we didn't explode is because there was no gas in the car. We were on empty. God. And, just all these things that happened, right? Like someone tried to throw me over the inside of a Embassy Suites. I think it was maybe this 8th floor, tried to throw me over before my cousin and my brother came out and helped me. So yeah, there was all these crazy moments. And then there was I would get arrested, right? And there was these officers that would be like they would start preaching the gospel to me. And I was like, what is this? Wow. What is this guy doing? My old boss, I worked at a paper mill, started preaching the gospel to me. So all this time, I didn't really care. I flirted with death. I didn't care if I died, but God, I felt like as I look back, I see that God was there. There was nothing to live for me. Even when I ended up going to prison later on, in my 20s, I felt like that was my destiny. My dad had been in prison. My uncles were in prison. There was nothing, for me to look forward to. And so if I died, whatever, you know what I mean? It felt like I would probably get more love being dead than I am alive. I burned bridges. People hated me, a lot of messed up relationships. My kids, I didn't want them to I had two kids at the time. I mean, I have two kids, but like I had a son at 17 and a daughter I think I was 23. And, when they were born, that didn't even change me. I was still the same exact person. But there's one moment, when, I was kind of like trying to find my way, right? I got out of parole. I got out of prison. This is what would happen to me. When I went to prison, the first time I got out of prison, um, I was absconding, which means I left. I didn't check it with my parole. I was back in prison 28 days later.
Oh, wow.
I got out after that, after doing maybe like 8 months, or I don't know if it was at maybe it was 6 to 8 months, right? Um, and then I got on a Friday. I was back in on Monday for doing a beer run. So that was my life. I didn't care.
Yeah.
And before that, I had been every year since I was 14 years old, in and out of, being incarcerated my entire life, right? And one parole officer finally said, "Man, you need help. You
Yeah.
are a drug addict. You are an alcoholic." Like, they put me in a rehab, and then after a few months there, like, I played it off, but I left the rehab. And I remember he goes, "I'm going to give you one more chance, like, to get out." My uncle, who was a pastor at the time, and he invited me to see this professional skateboarder that got saved. And I was like, his name is Simon Woodstock, and I was like, wait, this guy, I saw him on MTV. He was a VJ on MTV. He's a pro skater from San Jose, and I'm like, that dude was crazy. I gotta hear this. I gotta hear about this guy. So I went to church, I mean, I've been in and out of church my entire life, like, kind of when I was a teenager. My family was Catholic, so I knew about Jesus, but I didn't have a relationship with him.
Right.
But it's crazy because, that guy kind of drew me to like, whoa, that guy's crazy. I heard it. I wanted to go back, but I still wanted to get high. So a couple of days later, I went out with some friends to San Francisco. I mean, I think people wanted to kill me there too. I was being a jerk. I was drunk. I was on drugs. I remember standing, like, we went out to the beach and did a bonfire, stood in the fire. My pants were singed. My shoes were melted at the bottom, and I was like saying things about Satan. I was just like, didn't care anymore, right? So when I came back, I knew that I had to be bottled, and I could have no drinking and no drugs. And so there's this there's this old, tale that if you drink Arm& Hammer, it'll clean out your system. So I said, okay, I'm going to drink a lot of Arm & Hammer. I just kept pouring Arm & Hammer. So it got me so sick, right? Like, I was like puking, I was vomiting. And I remember after like the 10th time I vomited, it started to come out like blood. It looked like blood, what I thought was blood, and it filled the sink. And I felt myself getting dizzy, and I was shaking. And I'd been on meth, and I had been drinking, and I go, if I knew at that moment that I felt like I was going to die. I started to lose consciousness, and I remember I said, I had heard the gospel, and I said, Jesus, if you're real, all this time I had, flirted with death, but now when I faced death, I really wanted to live.
Yeah.
And I called out to Jesus Christ, and I said, Jesus, if you're real, help me. And I remember God's presence came towards me. I felt like God's presence, and I had never felt more alive in my entire life. That moment when I reached out to Jesus Christ, I was like, I'm alive. I'm truly like alive. And that was the greatest experience of my entire life, to know Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Everything changed at that moment, but I never felt love. I never felt like I was alone. I never felt like that I was cared for, and that I was accepted for who I was. God accepted me for who I was at that moment. And I wasn't, I was a drug addict. I was stealing from people, and I was an alcoholic, and I was a jerk. And I felt Jesus right there, and that's my moment. My
Yeah.
life radically changed when Jesus came at the moment. I felt like I had to share the whole story because you'll see, like, it. Nothing fazed me until that moment when I cried out to God.
Yeah.
Nothing fazed me, and I truly felt alive.
Yeah, it's often when we're at our lowest that he comes and gets us. I mean, I heard something the other day about people say, "Oh, well, God helps those who help themselves," and no, he doesn't. He helps those who can't help themselves.
Yeah,
It's always when you're at your lowest point that he just reaches in. That's the moment, and it's clear. Like I said, I've talked to a million other people that say the exact same thing. It was always it's not necessarily rock bottom, but it's that
yeah,
realization that my life is going nowhere. I need something more, and there he is. That he's just reaching out his hands. It's crazy. um your book is very vulnerable, and I appreciate that so much about your story. One of the things, I think that's something that was probably, it had to be the most difficult thing for you in writing this book, because I can see, the story is real. Oftentimes when I'm sitting here and I'm reading a book about somebody's life, I mean, it's like you're reading the words off the page, but you've lived that, and now, since you've gone through this whole experience, and you've gone through this whole life change, and now you've come so far. You're doing speaking engagements at the White House. You've got the mayor being on the anti-gang task force, I believe, with your city. I mean,
hmm
you know can you speak a little bit about, how that has affected your life, and how that affects others? I mean, what do you think the draw is for other people to sort of come into that that part of your life? I mean, is it just the change, or is it more about sharing your love of Christ, or what is sort of, um what is sort of, do you think, is bringing the people to you?
In Matthew, chapter 5, right? It says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven."
Yeah.
And I think that's what I want to do. Whether it's speaking or whether it's my actions, I want to glorify God in everything that I do.
Amen.
Um, I used to destroy. Like I used to. You know, I remember when I was younger, break things in my house, and I get mad at my mom. I destroyed relationships, burned bridges, and I felt like God really wants me to build. And I think that's one of the things that I think that's effective for my work with youth is that I'm just real with them, right? Like I tell them, how it is, right? Um, I don't just come out and just blurt out my story, but they just like they know that I love them. Like I really love, with an agape love, the
Yeah.
people that I work with. I really care about them. I really care about their future. I care about them going to class. I care about them not getting involved in gangs. I care about them if they're fighting, or their grades, or all these things. I think it's just God opened the doors for the White House and for the other opportunities. I've been able to share and been able to travel a lot. Um, but I just share my story,
Yeah.
just and I try to make it as real as I want it to be as real as not try. I want it to be as real as possible, and of course it's hard. I get embarrassed sometimes. I think back and I cringe, and like, ooh, like people, I don't want. Sometimes you don't want to let people see everything about you, but I think the more vulnerable that I am, that it shows God's love for me.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I work on public school campuses, and there is a separation of church and state, and I have a job to do there. I do my job there, which is mentoring. We do coaching, like life coaching for the students, like life skills.
Mhm.
We do conflict resolution on campuses. We have a lot of fun. We do fun activities on campuses for the kids. We take them on trips and stuff like that. And I'm not out there just preaching the gospel. But again, I'm going back to let your light so shine before men, they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Um, but I think it is just sharing love. with others, genuine love.
Yeah, it's very authentic, I think because your story is so raw and so real, you know, it wouldn't be a good book if it was just like, oh, you just woke up one day and everything just flipped a switch and life was great. Such a journey that you're on. I want to go back to something a little bit earlier because you mentioned that when you were in these gangs, when you were in juvenile hall, you said that you didn't feel like you had anything else. You didn't feel like you had any other choice or anything like that. And, it's real easy to sit here and talk about, you hear like buzzwords like gang violence and all this, but we
Yeah.
speak a lot today about equality and you can go in a lot of different directions with that conversation. But what it really boils down to is equality of outcome. Can you speak to that a little bit? In certain areas, do you think that a lot of the gang members that you know or knew, do you think there's no other way out of their situation than gang life? Is that a common theme?
Like some of the students I work with that are involved in gangs, have shared with me, like, I live in a gang neighborhood, right? I only have basically they only have three options, right? Um, join the gang, hide from the gang, or fight the gang.
Right.
That's just their three. They have no in the areas. You think about the Silicon Valley and you think about the wealth that's here.
Yeah.
In some areas of our town, especially East San Jose, there's a huge divide there, right? And I think, somebody once one of the students told me one time, he's like, I found out he got jumped into a gang, and I'm like, what happened? What's going on? He was doing well in school. He said, you know what? I live in a house with like an apartment with two other families. I can't think. I can't study. And then if I graduate, what's it going to get me? Or some of them are undocumented. I can't work beyond this. How am I going to make money? So part of it is, being involved with these gangs. If there's drug dealing involved or robberies or anything like that, they're being a part of. So I think there is. Sometimes they feel like there is no way out, but there is. There's a young man that I work with, and I remember the day that he called me when he got jumped in, because I was warning him. He would hang around with the gangsters, but he never got jumped in. And I would always tell him, like, why are you always, hanging out? And he would tell me, it's like, he's in high school, and he's like, I'm not going to get jumped in. I like to hang out there. And I said, you become who you hang out with, right?
Yeah.
And there's older guys that are coaching these younger guys, like, to get in the game. They want their numbers. And one day he called me and he was crying and he said, I got jumped in. Pastor, I got jumped in. I'm ordained. I was a pastor, at a church. So they call me Pastor Dan. It's funny. I haven't been like a teaching pastor or youth pastor for over 10 years, and they still call me Pastor Danny. It's funny. But he said, Pastor, I got jumped in, and but I'm still, of course, through ministry. I do chaplaincy ministry, and I do teach at churches sometimes. Just want to make that clear. But he was crying, and he said, I ruined my life. I said, what happened? He goes, the OGs or the older guys, they said, hey, like, you've been around here a lot. It's time to make a commitment, basically, right?
Oh, wow.
And they manipulated him into getting jumped in high school. I think he was about 14, 15 years old. And he cried and he goes, my life is over. I'm a target. My sister's a target. My mom and my grandma are targets now. Like what did I do to my life? He was weeping on the phone. And then I think he just kind of embraced it after that and started living the lifestyle. But I kept telling him, like, you need to get out. You need to get out. And about 2 years later, he got out of the gang. He left. It's dangerous to get out of the gang.
Oh yeah.
Because now you're their target. You're not only the target of their of the other gangs, but you're now a target of your former gang.
Right.
And this young man's working now, and he's getting his self together. But it's just it's so hard, like, to get out. He had to move for a while out of town. But they feel like that's the only way that they're going to make it sometimes, some of the kids they were working with.
Can you go over real quick, just for somebody that isn't really familiar with this space a little bit? What you mentioned the term, I believe, fought in. I mean,
Jumped in. Yeah.
jumped in. Can you explain that?
So it's like an initiation, right? It's like, it's kind of like baptism, right? You get baptized at a church and people are there, right? It's the same thing. We're getting jumped in. Like you're a part of the gang. You're making just like we say with baptism, right? It's an outward expression of an inward change, right? It's an outward expression that this is your family now, right? You're part of.
That's a little different.
No, but like I heard somebody say this before. But it's different. But that's what they're doing, right? They're basically your initiation into. They beat you up, depending on the gang. The two Latino gangs are norteños and sureños here, and one identifies with the number 13, and one identifies with the number 14. And so 13 or 14 seconds, all the guys get to beat you up, right?
Wow.
But you feel like they love you for some reason. I felt like I was so connected with them after I was on the floor and they were kicking me. They picked me up and they hugged me. They like embraced me,
Yeah.
And that's the initiation makes you really feel like you're special. I don't know why. It's crazy because they're beating you up. They're punching you. I've seen guys after they got jumped in, black eyes, busted lips, and they're happy. They're part of something,
Yeah. It amazes me, all the trauma and all the things that you went through early on in your life. Do you think any of that had to do with how you ended up in that situation? I mean, do you think that was the cause of it?
I think because I didn't want anybody to ever touch me again, right? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be protected. I wanted to feel safe, I think, and I felt like my friends. When you're a teenager, I mean, like your friends are your world, right?
Yeah.
You would do anything for your friends, and you feel like they would do anything for you, and I felt safe. You know what I mean? Honestly, I was afraid of the dark, and I didn't like to be alone. I would sleep with the light on. I love being at my friend's house, I would sleep on the floor in their room. I didn't care. I just would be being around people, and I felt like they would sneak me in. If I couldn't go home, I'd fight it with my mom or something happened at home. And I really felt like there was I really felt like loved,
Yeah.
I really felt like a part of something, but yeah, they don't hold back. When they jump you in, you're getting pulverized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's such a different world than a lot of people know,
Yeah.
You eventually went into, juvenile detention, and then I believe actually in jail, older in prison. We've all seen that show Scared Straight, but you kind of lived it. So, I mean, do you feel, having been in that system, do you feel like that helped you at all? Or do you think that, what was it like for you once you were out? How can you give us a little insight into how it felt while you were incarcerated and then when you were released?
Yeah. So the first time I was incarcerated for the strong arm robbery, I remember, changing into the clothing, the juvenile hall clothing, and then they walked me to a cell. And remember, I was claustrophobic. I already had a lot of issues with, I felt like, I didn't like to be in any enclosed place, and they locked me in the door, and it was terrifying.
Mm.
I was banging on the door. I was crying, and they pulled me out. I was hyperventilating, but no screaming, no tantrum, nothing would get me out of that. There was no family member or friend that could get me out of that place. And on top of that, I had to defend myself because oh, why were you crying last night? You know what I mean? The next day I was fighting. I had to defend, myself, that I wasn't weak. And I fought nearly every day when I was in juvenile. The first time I was incarcerated, I was there for 30 days, right? And I remember it was terrible. They would come with a key and lock you in a room. And I eventually just kind of had to cope with it. I couldn't sleep. When you're the things that help you while you're incarcerated, they're they're not good for, everyday real life outside, right? Like I was a
Right.
manipulator. I fought a lot, I felt like very, very defensive. You never know who's trying to get over on you. So after those first 30 days, I remember getting out and, everybody acted like the world, everybody's life, it just went on, right? Their world just kept going. But like something changed in me. I was hard. I was a way different person.
Yeah.
I felt like I had to protect myself. In there it's loud, and like I could shut things. Like I could, if I don't want to talk to or listen to somebody, I could just shut it off. I had to deal with that all day,
Mm.
and I had to sit in this room alone for hours because I fought a lot. I was on 23-hour lockdown because I would fight a lot, So I'd be in
Yeah.
a cell 23 hours out of my day. Within a few weeks, I was, that's what would happen to me because of my fighting.
Our system is a little bit flawed, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Having gone through all that, do you think that it actually works to reform inmates, or do you think it creates longer term criminal lifestyles being in the system? Do you think that sort of continues that, span of life?
Well, for me, it did.
Mm,
I just learned a lot of things. The like how to get over, like how to manipulate people, different types of crimes, and all this stuff. I would just hear people talk, and we talk about it. To put a blanket over it, I don't think it's fair, but it's a case by case per person, right?
yeah.
I think for me, I needed help. I was coping with my trauma through drugs and alcohol, and I couldn't handle alcohol. I would start fighting. I would just mouth off,
Yeah.
get belligerent, drunk, and I think that um, back then it was really hard on crime. Like for anything, I would be locked up. It's different now. They let them out with an ankle bracelet, and some of them recommit crimes. The pendulum swings back and forth, right? Like
Yeah.
really hard on crime, then it's a little looser. And I think, because we have to also think about the victims, right? Like the victims of these crimes. Like I don't want to be like, hey, like this for this person, but not think about like, if there was a assault or a murder,
Yeah.
like somebody lost their life, we need to really like consider both sides, right?
Yeah.
But I one thing that gets me is charging juveniles as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
giving them a life sentence at 16 years old. I mean, it's crazy
Yeah.
to me, But again, it's a case by case, per individual, and I don't know what some of these kids have been through. I do some of them because they tell me. I've been in juvenile hall. I've worked with our juvenile hall in the past. I've been able to speak there through the chaplain program there, and but I don't know. I wish there was more, more ways that the kids can, or kids and well, more the adults, because the adults you're just sitting around all day. At least when I was in juvenile hall, they made us go to school. I got my grades out,
Ah,
but we had and there was some activities back then, right? But there was a lot of free time when we're just mouthing off and learning how to commit crimes. But for adults, like you have to sign up for these programs. And for someone like me, like I didn't care. I didn't do well at school. Like I said earlier,
yeah.
I felt stupid. Teachers called me dumb, that I was
Mm,
stupid, that I'm never going to make anything in my life. And so, I learned how to read better when I was incarcerated because all you could do sometimes when you're on 23-hour lockdown.
right.
But, I couldn't speak well. I mean, what helped me to speak now, be a public speaker is I read the Bible.
Oh
I
wow.
just read through the Bible and I learned the Bible, and it's not an easy read,
Yeah.
but I read the entire Bible, and that helped me to understand things and to communicate it. It expanded my vocabulary, my comprehension. It did a lot for me. And there's a lot of great Christian books out there that helped me to learn. I encourage like anyone, read. Read the Bible. Listen to podcasts, and things like that. Watch where you're constantly learning. I want to, I want to learn more. I always want to keep growing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you're an adult, like there's like nothing to do all day, basically. You know what I mean?
I love your story of growth, and clearly you're doing things different now, and you're doing big things in the life of other people. I also love the fact that you changed your life turned around, and it happens all the time when people find God, they want to share it with others. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful what you're doing. So let's talk about the City Peace Project a little bit.
Mhm.
What are you doing now with the City Peace Project? What is the goal of City Peace Project, and what are the things that you all are doing for the community out there?
We, are on public schools. We started with just high schools, and I just went in there and just shared my story and just shared my heart with the kids, right? I didn't have like this, what we have now. We have curriculum that, I created.
Right.
But back, I just shared my story. We're in high schools. Now we're from pre-K through 12th grade in multiple districts. And what we do is we do mentoring, life coaching, like life skills. We have tutors. We do we do like conflict resolution on campus, campus safety, just helping guide the kids with truancy, getting them back, goal setting, and just kind of like helping the kids get back on track. So that's because I'm the chaplain for the gang task force, the lead chaplain,
Okay.
and I did sadly, I've had to bury a lot of young people that have died through youth violence.
Yeah.
From like 13 years old, 14 years old, 15-year-old that were murdered in gang violence. So I created a crisis response program for the gang task force that after a homicide, after the police come and, do their part, we would go and meet with the family and with friends of the deceased. And so what we do is we would provide, of course, like spiritual care, we provide food, we get monetary donations from churches and donors to help us. Nobody expects their 15-year-old to be murdered in, a drive-by,
Yeah.
And so we, I would talk with these kids at the funeral. Some of the families would ask me if I can, do the funeral for them and speak at their funeral. And I met a lot of the kids that I started working with later because they remembered me, right? They would remember, like, they would call me the priest. They were like, "Oh, you're the priest that did my homeboy Snoopy's funeral," or
Right.
or you helped Lazy's family. They all have these little nicknames, right?
Yeah.
And at one particular funeral, this young man, he was murdered. He was 18. He was a senior in high school, and it was so sad. His dad was a single. He raised him. A single dad raised him. And I think the dad even told me that he heard the gunshot.
Oh no!
But he didn't know. He heard it and found out later what had happened. It was horrible. And they asked if I can, like if I can share at the funeral. So when it's time for, the time to share about the memories of the deceased, usually it takes about 10, 15 minutes. People come up, depending, this one was in a small chapel, and the seats were completely full. There was people around the edges of the chapel. It was hot. There's probably over 200 people in there. And a lot of the people spoke. It took 2+ hours for them to share about teachers, principals, coaches, friends, just sharing about how much they loved them. And it was so sad. And I remember looking out, and there was people in the, that were there. And you could smell alcohol, marijuana. Some were angry. Some were crying. Some just had a blank face. And just every type of emotion out there, as far as like dealing with loss, right? And I remember God spoke to me at that moment, like, they're like sheep without a shepherd. I need you to shepherd them. And that's when I really felt like, with a good conscience, I don't want to be there at the end. Yeah. I want to help redirect them in the beginning. And that's how the City Peace Project was birthed into what we're doing now. And our goal is to see these kids have peace within and live a peaceful life and be successful,
Yeah.
And we do outside events in the community and gang impacted communities. And then also, I personally do Bible studies, on my own, right? Like I do Bible studies outside of the City Peace Project. During the pandemic, we had 60 salvations. We started 2 Bible studies in a park because we had to be outside, and we did 6 baptisms.
Wow.
During the pandemic, so God really moved, and I think there was a lot of hopelessness, and again, like I just want to be real with people, share love, and share my own experience with them. But those are the things that that my heart does. Like outside of the City Peace Project, I'm going to do a Bible study because these kids keep asking me questions. It's not just kids. It was families.
Yeah.
Like parents were asking me, inviting me and wanted to talk to me about God because during the pandemic, a lot of people, there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of things that they would ask me. And I said, you know what, how about I just do a Bible study with your family? I'll come over. And it was beautiful, to be able to support them in that way and pray for them. And
one of the things I loved finding out about you is, it would be easy. I speak to a lot of nonprofits. And it would be easy just for an executive director to just start the nonprofit and do the busy work, just delegate tasks to people and get money coming in and, move the entire purpose. But the ones that always do the best work are the ones where the person in charge wants to be out in the field. I can totally see that in you. I see that's just that's a beautiful thing. That impact on your community that you're making. It really shines bright. When and again, sometimes it takes times of tremendous loss to realize what needs to be done and to realize what needs to be unlocked in yourself in order to help your community. So I love what you're doing. I think that you saw the need and you took action to make an impact. I think it's a beautiful thing.
I love being on the ground. I love being out there with the people. It just makes me feel so alive. I've cried with them. I laugh with them. And I, like in my book, it says the opposite of trauma and pain is fun. I like to have fun on campuses. If you see our Instagram, you'll see a lot of the stuff that we do. We have a lot of fun, and that's something that's healing for me. I went from pain to purpose, right? And I think when I was pastoring at a church, as a youth pastor, I got so busy in the work that I kind of started to lose myself. I had no more peace, and that's where the peace came in when I had to reevaluate my life and my calling, where God has called me to, right? And because you have to have self-care. Jesus took his disciples aside for quiet time, and I didn't know that. Nobody taught me that, but God showed me that I need that time for self-care and healing. And I think Christians out there, take that time, take your time set aside for God and for yourself. I think we neglect that a lot. I think, so busy serving or doing things that we need to sit at the feet of Jesus.
Well, I love what you guys are doing. I think that you're making a tremendous impact in a community that probably needs it more than a lot of people realize. So with that being said, how can people help the City Peace Project? What do you guys need? And, how can people get involved with what you're doing?
If you're here in the Bay Area, especially San Jose area, I think we need volunteer tutors. It's always helpful for us to have tutors and people to help us we do events at parks, like fun events at parks, and things like that would be very helpful. Of course, prayer, always pray for us. Monetary support is always helpful, of course, because we like to do a lot of things with the kids, like take them out on new experiences. Again, we live in the heart of Silicon Valley. Like if there's somebody a listener that maybe works at Google or Apple, we do tours there. We've done tech tours to get the kids out of their current circumstance.
Yeah, I saw that you took some kids into, I believe, Google, and they were talking about engineering and things like that. And I heard you talking about it on another podcast. Can you go over that experience with them a little bit? I mean, what was going on with everybody?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because most of the kids were involved in a gang that I took to Google, and we went there, and the engineer was explaining all the technical part of engineering, and some of them started to fall asleep, and I was getting like, oh, what's going on here? It's like I'm losing them, right? I'm sitting out there, and then when he let them code, simple coding, they were making all these little. Everybody came to life. It was so cool to see them, like, like typing in, laughing. Come here, look at what I created, because it was a simple coding system, right? But that hands-on experience being there it was a great experience. It was, they're like, you get free food here, a huge cafeteria and all that stuff. But I think it's like one of the kids after said, I could see myself here.
Wow.
I could see myself working here. And that really touched my heart, because I'm like, you know what? Like, a lot of times they don't see themselves outside of their neighborhood or their current circumstance, and to see and what they share at the tech tours is like, it's not only being an engineer or coder. There's other work, artists, there's lawyers. There's just a bunch of different type of work that people can do on a campus, a cook, there's so many different opportunities on these tech campuses in the Bay Area. And where I live at, like, you can go a half hour in every direction. There's Netflix, Apple, Tesla, Google, they're all here,
Yeah.
Amazon, all these places are not far, from where I live. And there's a lot of opportunity, but I think there's a huge divide, and we need to, bridge that divide for a lot of these underserved communities, that we work with. I mean, the elite can get there. There's stuff for kids that are, maybe better at math and doing well in school, but my kids, they don't feel like anybody ever wants to take them anywhere like that.
Yeah.
Because they don't think that they belong there. And one of them even asked, we went to Apple on a tour, and they said, I asked them, hey, what did you think? And they go, oh, I thought everybody's supposed to be wearing lab coats and glasses. These guys are wearing shorts and, flip-flops and, and they're just so casual. They couldn't believe it, the environment. So it's just interesting just to give them a different view of life, That was really cool.
Yeah, for sure. It amazes me. We were talking a little bit earlier before we started the podcast about seeing the scripture in people and seeing how scripture plays out in their life. Dude, Jeremiah 29:11, hope in a future. Yeah. It's right there, man. You literally just said it, dude.
Yeah.
Wow. Goosebumps. Sorry.
Yeah. But it's just trying to inspire. I think everyone needs it. Everybody needs that. Like, you're loved, you're valuable.
Yeah.
You need some direction. You know what I mean? Helping to guide people. And it's not just in underserved communities. There's people all over the world that just need to be connected.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's beautiful what you're doing. How can people find out about you more? I know you guys are on social media. Where's your social media? What's your website? And tell me a little bit more about the book. We'll put it down in the show notes with a link, but tell me what the name of the book is and all that stuff again.
All right. So the book is Post-Traumatic Quest, My Quest to Transcend Trauma, Turn My Pain to Purpose and Find Peace. They can find it on Amazon, or you can go to our website, posttraumaticquest.com. Also, we have Post-Traumatic Quest on Instagram. And then also, if you want to learn more about the City Peace Project, thecitypeaceproject.org. You can see some of our videos on YouTube, The City Peace Project, Instagram, The City Peace Project. If you want to follow me, see my other adventures, a lot of the City Peace Project stuff, but other things that I'm doing, Pastor Danny _Sanchez on Instagram, or Danny Sanchez on Facebook.
All right. Well, there you go, Misfits. Go check him out. We'll put links to all that stuff down in the show notes down below. I definitely think it's a great follow, and he does amazing work in his community. I love what you're doing. Danny, we're winding down towards the end a little bit, but at the end of every episode, I ask every guest the same question, and normally I get that deer in the headlights look of, uh-oh, what's coming, right? So That question is, what was the last goal that you completed, and what's the next goal that you want to set for yourself?
Before the pandemic, I was working out. I lost about 30 pounds, and I felt really good. And during the pandemic, just everything kind of shut. Well, of course, everything shut down, but so did my motivation. It really shut down. And I got off my fitness path, and if you don't know, I love skateboarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you look at my Instagram, you'll see some of the things. So I want to get back in shape. I want to, I love the way I felt at the time, but also I want to do a kickflip again.
Oh, there you go.
I want to land a kickflip on my board. I've landed them off and on, but I want to be consistent. Landing, that's one of my goals. And I think, I've been practicing a lot. I go out and skateboard a lot. I skate, the skate parks, they have the bowls, I drop in and do all that stuff in there. I'm not super good. I'm okay. But, I want to be able to do some flat ground tricks on my skateboard. Skaters out there will understand what I'm saying.
Hey, I know what you're saying. Yeah. I'm impressed. I cannot. I live at the beach and people are always like, hey, you want to go surfing? I'm like, nope, that is controlled falling for me. Well, that's awesome, man. I mean, I think what you're doing is great, and you're a very talented guy, and I appreciate what you do. I think you are making an impact in places, like I said, that people may not know that place needs an impact. So, I mean, kudos. Thanks so much for what you do, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show, Chris. I really appreciate it. And Misfits, thank you for watching. And we're peace. We call ourselves the peacemakers. I love when the kids, if you look on Instagram, they'll throw the peace sign. But Misfits, you can also throw that peace sign with us.
I love it. Well, Danny, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm going to send people to your site. I want people to go check you out. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this guy up. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on the show, and you have a great evening. All right.
Thank you so much for having me. Peace.
Well, Misfits, we did it. That's our episode. I want to thank you so much for listening, and thanks again to our sponsors. If you want to support any of our sponsors, there are affiliate links on the sponsors tab of our website at www.misfit-heroes.com. You can also find links to all of our social media there, so follow us for immediate up-to-date info about the podcast. Please, if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to help me out, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button down below so you're notified of new episodes as they're released, and make sure to leave a rating or review of the show on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Truly, Misfits, I love you. Thank you so much for listening. And until the next episode, be kind, love one another, and be a hero.